This episode of Bullet Heaven was made with a copy of the game provided by Zerodiv. In episode 206 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at Tengai for Nintendo Switch, one of the few side-scrolling shooters from Psikyo. It was recently released by Zerodiv for Nintendo's hybrid console, but it turns out Zerodiv is on a real roll. Following up Tengai only a week later, Zerodiv is back with yet another uncommon Psikyo shooting game, and it's one that really innovates beyond anything we've seen from Psikyo up until now. Dragon Blaze for Nintendo Switch is a vertical shooting game released on April 5th, 2018. It was originally developed by Psikyo and released to arcades in the year 2000. It would also see release to the PlayStation 2 in Japan as a compilation with Sol Divide in 2005, and as a budget title in Europe from 505 Games the next year. Featuring a cadre of dragon-riding warriors and a slew of new mechanics, how does Dragon Blaze shake things up? Let's take a look. Dragon Blaze's gameplay takes a lot of radical departures from Psikyo's many preceding shooters, but the basics are all here as well. Players have their choice of 4 characters, each with their own fire patterns, speed, special attacks, and bombers. 8-way movement resides at the core of Dragon Blaze's controls, with a rapid shot mapped to A, single fire and charged special fire to Y, and the player's bomber mapped to B. Players can collect power-ups from various enemies that increase their firepower to a total level of 4. As with other Psikyo games, this power level will decrease if players collide with an enemy rather than outright dying. However, a player's maximum firepower will not downgrade over time like many other Psikyo games. The first main change to the typical Psikyo formula is how the charged special attacks work. These special attacks depend on a magic gauge that is found on the bottom of the screen respective of the player's side, and charges with enemy destruction and bullet collision. It still works in a similar manner to Strikers 1945-2, where players can only engage the special attack when their gauge reaches a certain level of charge power. But unlike Strikers 1945-2, there are no tiered power levels. Instead, the player's special can still be used as long as it doesn't fall below the usable threshold. The biggest addition to the gameplay in Dragon Blaze is the player's ability to dismount from their dragon by pressing the X button. When engaged, the player's dragon will lunge forward to heavily damage enemies while being able to fire at a stationary point in conjunction with the player's character. When the player is unmounted, their character can still fly about the screen with the ability to fire light shots, but the dragon's dismounted power shot is relative to the level of collective shot power. It gets even more interesting. When dismounted, players can use the magic gauge to perform a completely different dragon-based special attack relative to their dragon's position. This attack behaves exactly as the player's primary special with regards to charge and activation. Using these attacks can really turn the tides in certain crowded stages or versus mid-stage and end-stage bosses, depending on the character chosen. Like a lot of other Psikyo games, the player's bomber attack is helpful against more crowded groups of enemies or situations with a lot of shots. However, each bomber has a varying degree of coverage on the screen, with only Quaid's bomber nullifying the whole screen's bullets. Everyone else has a more localized area of efficacy for their bombers. Each stage has additional bomber drops, allowing for fairly liberal use, especially against bosses. Dragon Blaze is played over the course of 7 stages, with multiple loops playable on higher difficulty levels. Just like many other Psikyo games, the first 4 stages are randomized with every playthrough. Though the gameplay on the whole is maybe a tiny bit less intense than other more brutal Psikyo shmups like Gunbird or Strikers 1945-2, it's still more than challenging for even intermediate players to see the end on a single credit, even on skill level 1. Thankfully, the number of lives and credits can always be adjusted through the meta options menu, accessible by the plus button for players that might need a helping hand through the game. Most Psikyo games have fairly fun, if simple, gameplay on the whole, but they're also very safe in terms of the kinds of gameplay that they offer. Dragon Blaze, on the other hand, is quite a bit more engaging, especially taking the dragon dismount and alternate special attacks into consideration. It makes for a very dynamic gameplay style that, as it turns out, is really fun to play, especially with a friend. Like many other Psikyo games, the story arcs between each of the 4 characters changes depending who is being used by each player. However, there's only a single generic ending scene with only the chosen characters changing when playing a co-op game to the end. Despite this, Dragon Blaze really nails it with its gameplay, but it also takes the typical scoring methods found in other Psikyo games and adds new twists that really makes for a fun score chaser too. The scoring in Dragon Blaze is still pretty straightforward, but offers a good amount of risk-reward that isn't typically seen in games from Psikyo. Simple though these mechanics may be, it makes the game even more engaging, especially when reaching for that handy extend at 600,000 points. Enemy destruction once again takes the forefront of a player's scoring, but this time around quite a few different enemies will drop silver medals for players to collect. These medals are worth 100 points each, but these add up very quickly as the stage progresses. Here's where the main risk-reward comes into play. If players attack their foes by launching their dragon, any enemy defeated will drop gold coins. Not only are these coins worth 200 points apiece, more are dropped per enemy defeated, including those that normally don't drop medals through a normal kill. In the case of larger enemies, huge swaths of medals can be dropped for collection, resulting in a sizable bonus score. The player's dragon can also collect these medals as they stay in place, allowing for the player to catch the stragglers that it misses. There are also specific places that players can shoot to uncover what's known as a golden career. These secret emplacements will drop a huge amount of gold coins when shot. Launching the player's dragon can help in collecting a giant amount of these coins while dealing with other enemies and avoiding enemy fire. Players that collect power-ups past level 4 will also get a 4,000 point bonus for each one collected. If a player can maintain their level as long as possible, this can result in quite a sizable bonus throughout the player's game. Especially in later stages, there are quite a few opportunities for a huge boost in points using this method. Taking all of this into consideration, the scoring is riskier, but more fun as a result. Players looking for more out of a Psikyo shooter will definitely like what Dragon Blaze brings to the table. But, as is the case with all other Zerodiv releases, there are no online leaderboards for Dragon Blaze, leaving players to jam that screen capture button to post their scores to a forum of their choice. In the future, we hope that Dragon Blaze and all of Zerodiv's other titles will have an online leaderboard patched in, especially with Dragon Blaze's scoring being as fun as it is. The gameplay isn't the only thing that's been shaken up in Dragon Blaze. The presentation is also quite a bit different than most other games that Psikyo has made. Whether it's the sound or visuals, Dragon Blaze has a very different flavor from all of its predecessors. Now, in Soul Divide, we came away a little less than impressed with the ugly pre-rendered characters that it employed. While Dragon Blaze still uses 3D pre-renders for its sprites, they are much more full and far less ugly than was seen in Soul Divide. Smooth animation, great shot visuals, and clear representations of everything from backgrounds to enemies and character sprites make for a game that doesn't look bad at all. The character design here is much different than what we've seen in a lot of other Psikyo titles as well, with a smooth hand-drawn anime style that comes away looking better than the pixel art characters of games like the original Gunbird or Tengai, and better designed than the Woeful cast in Soul Divide. As always, detailed character portraits of each player's chosen unit is displayed on their respective side of the screen. There is a small issue with the visuals though. There's a lot of colorful debris from enemy kills that can sometimes cause confusion as to what is a shot and what isn't in some stages. Players should get used to this over time, but on the outset, it can be pretty distracting. The sound in Dragon Blaze is a bit of a mixed bag though. On one hand, the choice in sound effects for shots, explosions, bonuses, and more are great for their applied use. The voiceovers in Dragon Blaze are also well delivered, complete with alternate samples for collecting power-ups beyond level 4. Despite this, Ian's samples are just a little on the iffy side, but still nowhere near bad overall. The soundtrack is where we found Dragon Blaze to be a little less great. Not that the OST is terrible, far from it, but the compositions feel as if they drag a little. In fact, they're actually quite reminiscent of Striker's 1945 Plus Portable on the PSP system, which has an OST that we dislike quite a bit by comparison to the vastly superior Striker's 1945 2. Granted, Dragon Blaze's soundtrack is still okay, just not fantastic. Somehow, it still does end up working for its applied use. Meanwhile, the story in Dragon Blaze is pretty standard stuff. Players are tasked with collecting 4 magic stones to defeat an evil overlord. With mix and match story arcs between the 4 selectable player characters, there's quite a bit of replay to Dragon Blaze through story interaction alone, a typical trait in many preceding Psikyo games. Rounding out the presentation in Dragon Blaze is a clean UI and a ton of options in the meta options menu, including screen filters with a scanline option, classic or high resolution text, Japanese language support with full Japanese version visuals, and of course, Tate support for players at home or on the go. So, how does Dragon Blaze for Nintendo Switch stack up? Let's take a look. The controls in Dragon Blaze take a bit of getting used to, especially with regards to launching the player's dragon, but outside of this, players will find some of the tightest control yet seen in a Psikyo game. As always, Dragon Blaze has a steep challenge for any player of any skill level, even as far down as Monkey difficulty. But, on the whole, it's still a little less intense than other games such as Strikers 1945-2 or Gunbird. With 7 stages including 4 randomized ones and 2 loops on higher difficulties, there's already plenty to play in Dragon Blaze. Add to that several mix-and-match story arcs and a fun scoring system, and Dragon Blaze's length is pretty great. Dragon Blaze's pre-rendered visuals are far and away better than those seen in Sol Divide by a fair amount. Its clean UI and great character art make Dragon Blaze a pretty good looking game when it's all said and done, but some of the debris can be a little confusing on the outset. This time around, the sound is the weakest part of Dragon Blaze, with an OST that lacks a certain punch. The sound effects and voice work are still plenty good though. Dragon Blaze is a pretty uncharacteristic Psikyo game thanks to its neat dismount feature and alternate magic specials. It's definitely one of the most engaging Psikyo shooters we've seen to date thanks to its fun gameplay features and more engaging score mechanics. Once again, Dragon Blaze is only about $8 on the Nintendo eShop, making for an amazing value, especially compared to some of the prices on eBay for the PlayStation 2 version these days. The portability aspect alone makes this one of the best shooting games you can get on the Switch to date. Being the first time it has seen a console release in North America, Dragon Blaze is a pretty fresh game in general around these parts. It's yet another excellent vertical shooter brought to the modern console scene by Zerodiv that just so happens to be one of the most engaging from a pure gameplay standpoint too. Dragon Blaze for Nintendo Switch gets a 4.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of Dragon Blaze for Nintendo Switch on the Nintendo eShop for about $8. From what I can tell, there are no more follow-ups from Zerodiv on the horizon just yet.
I'd like to see Strikers 1945-3.
There's one more that I want to see.
Which one?
You'll love it.
Oh no.
It's manly.
Nope.